Dictation 10. Ready? What answer should you expect him to make if someone were to tell him that in those days he was watching foolish phantoms, but that now he is somewhat nearer to reality and is turned towards things more real and sees more correctly above all? If he were to point out him the several objects that are passing by and question him and compel him to answer what they are, should you not expect him to be puzzled and to regard his old visions as truer than the objects now forced upon him his notice? Yes, much truer. Hence, I suppose habit will be necessary to enable him to perceive objects in that upper world. At first, he will be most successful in distinguishing shadows, then he will discern the reflections of men and other things in water, and afterwards the realities. And after this, he will raise his eyes to encounter the light of the moon and stars, finding it less difficult to study the heavenly bodies and the heaven itself by night than the sun and the sun's light by day. Doubtless, last of all, I imagine he will be able to observe and contemplate the nature of the sun, not as it appears in water or on alien ground, but as it is in itself, in its own territory. Of course, his next step will be to draw the conclusion that the sun is the author of the seasons and the years, and the guardian of all things in the visible world, and in a manner the cause of all those things which he and his companions used to see. Obviously, this will be his next step. Now, this imaginary case you must apply in all its part to our former statements by comparing the region which the eye reveals to the prison house and the light of the fire therein to the power of the sun. And if by the upward ascent and the contemplation of the upper world you understand the mounting of the soul into the intellectual region, you will hit the tendency of my own surmises, since you desire to be told what they are, though indeed God only knows whether they are correct. But be that as it may be, the view which I take of the subject is to the following effect. In the world of knowledge, the essential form of good is the limit of our enquiries, and can barely be perceived, but when perceived, we cannot help concluding that it is in every case the source of all that is bright and beautiful in the visible world, giving birth to light and its master, and in the intellectual world, dispensing immediately and with fully authority truth and reason, and what whosoever would act wisely, either in private or in public, must set this form of good before his eyes. But as throughout most of Plato's teaching, there is an identification of the good with the truly real, which became embodied in the philosophical tradition and is still largely operative in our own day. In thus allowing a legislative function to the good, Plato produced a divorce between philosophy and science, from which, in my opinion, both have suffered ever since and are still suffering. The man of science, whatever his hopes may be, must lay them aside while he studies nature, and the philosopher, if he is to achieve truth, must do the same. Ethical considerations can only legitimately appear when the truth has been ascertained. They can and should appear as determining our feeling towards the truth and our manner of ordering our lives in view of the truth, but not as themselves dictating what the truth is to be. After Socrates has explained that there is an idea of the good, but not of such things as hair and mud and dirt, Parmenides advises him not to despise even the meanest things, and this advice shows the genuine scientific temper. It is with this impartial temper that the mystic's apparent insight into a higher reality and a hidden good has to be combined if philosophy is to realize its greatest possibilities. And it is failure in this respect that has made so much of idealistic philosophy thin, lifeless, and insubstantial. It is only in marriage with the world that our ideals can bear fruit. Divorced from it, they remain barren. But marriage with the world is not to be achieved by an ideal which shrinks from fact, or demands in advance that the world shall conform to its desires. Parmenides himself is the source of a peculiarly interesting strain of mysticism which provides Plato's thought, the mysticism which may be called logical, because it is embodied in theories on logic. This form of mysticism, which appears so far as the West is concerned to have originated with Parmenides, dominates the reasonings of all the great mystical metaphysicians from his day to that of Hegel and his modern disciples. Reality, he says, is uncreated, indestructible, unchanging, indivisible. It is immovable in the bonds of mighty chains, without beginning and without end, since coming into being and passing away have been driven afar, and true belief has cast them away. The fundamental principle of his inquiry is stated in a sentence which would not be out of place in Hegel. Mystical philosophy in all ages and in all parts of the world is characterized by certain beliefs which are illustrated by the doctrines we have been considering. There is, first, the belief in insight as against discursive analytical knowledge, the belief in a way of wisdom, sudden, penetrating, coercive, which is contrasted with the slow and fallible study of outward appearance by a science relying wholly upon the senses. All, in an inward passion, must have experienced at times the strange feeling of unreality in common objects, the loss of contact with daily things, in which the solidity of the outer world is lost, and the soul seems, in utter loneliness, to bring forth out of its own depths the mad dance of fantastic phantoms which have hitherto appeared as independently real and living. This is the negative side of the mystic's initiation, the doubt concerning common knowledge, preparing the way for the reception of what seems a higher wisdom. Many may men to whom this negative experience is familiar do not pass beyond it, but for the mystic it is merely the gateway to an ampler world. The mystic inside begins with the sense of a mystery unveiled, of a hidden wisdom, now suddenly become certain beyond the possibility of a doubt. The sense of a certainty and revelation comes earlier than any definite belief. Finished.